All right, welcome back. We say it as it is. We seek answers, we seek clarity, because the law is the law. Knows no emotions, knows no positions, and if so, the Constitution is very clear. But when a court gives an order, it is only but fair to all the other Kenyans who uphold the Constitution that whoever is compelled to account should actually be accountable. I'm joined tonight by Nelson Havi, who is an advocate, but he's also served as former LSK president in the past. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, you have been following the news. LSK has firmly declared their position in as far as Masengeli is concerned, saying he's not fit for office. How did you get to that? What does the law say? Is it possible then to declare him not fit for office and actually get him out of office? Because Kenyans are, if I use the word shocked or amused, by the 6 times he has failed to appear before the courts.
Well, first and foremost, the office that Gilbert Masengeli holds in an acting capacity is a state office. Is an office designated by the Constitution.
Okay.
Whoever takes the responsibility of being the Inspector General of the National Police Service takes an oath of office to serve in accordance with the Constitution. Now, the mere fact that Gilbert Masengeli has refused and failed to comply with court summons to attend court, but more importantly, to disclose the whereabouts of the missing 3 Kenyans or indicate what steps have been taken by the state towards tracing them, confirms that he's unsuitable to hold public office. He's actually a lawbreaker who has no business enforcing the law. Now, in these proceedings, the court may not declare him as unsuitable to hold public office.
All right.
But the court can declare that he has contravened the Constitution, as the court declared for Dr. Fred Matiang'i and Joseph Boynet. The next process then will be for a process to be undertaken to remove him from office, first as a senior police officer and second as a police officer. Thereafter, he'll cease being suitable to hold public office.
All right, now I'm curious, because the question would be, he has given his explanations for missing this particular appearance as in fact saying he's on duty. Now, someone would want to argue that it's okay to understand that the particular officer is on duty. So where do you draw the line? Being on duty too far or too much that you cannot really appear before the courts and send a representative for that matter? Where do you draw the line between duty and the contempt of court?
The first duty of a police officer is law and order.
Okay.
A court order is the first step towards complying with the duty to enforce law and order. You cannot tell us that you are on duty, yet you're attending a concert. You cannot tell us that you are on duty, yet you're attending a show somewhere in Kwale or Mombasa. Sorry to say, if you look at the demeanor of Gilbert Masengeli, he doesn't look like somebody serious enough to hold public office.
Is it? But he is acting in that capacity. Someone must have seen that he was qualified.
Yes, this is my evaluation, and this is the evaluation of most Kenyans.
Okay.
Deliberately put in office because he's an imbecile with no capacity of shouldering heavy responsibilities concerning matters of the nation, which is a disappointment. We cannot have a situation whereby serious matters, constitutional offices, are held by people who do not know what they're supposed to do. It's an indictment to the current status of governance in Kenya.
But we cannot say this is something new in the country. You mentioned Dr. Matiang'i yourself. We've seen Jonathan B. There's a whole list here that I'm quickly just going to read. But even as I do, maybe for clarity, we have the Contempt of Court Act 2016, which I believe eventually was, by the same courts, declared unconstitutional. All right? The question is, I mean, should it end there? Because then, if we do not have proper legislation around this, it's giving people a leeway to walk around scot-free, if I would term it that way, over the years after they disobey court orders. Clarify the position we are in with the Contempt of Court Act 2016 or any other, if there is another.
A court has power to enforce its court orders. It is not limited, it's not constrained. The Contempt of Court Act was a deliberate legislation to curtail the court in the exercise of that power, because this power is inherent. Right. It's given without limitation. Rightfully so, the court declared the act then unconstitutional for various reasons. But there is no incapacity. Courts have punished for contempt from the beginning of time.
All right.
And it's for that reason that as we speak right now, there is no handicap in the manner in which Gilbert Masengeli will be dealt with. He may be given a maximum sentence of 6 months for each and every offense, and in this particular case, today marks the 6th disobedience.
So for each of those?
Yes, ideally that's what ought to be the case.
All right.
He has disobeyed 6 court orders. So if we are to apply the maximum sentence for all the cases of disobedience, that will be 6 months times 6. The maximum penalty is a fine of 200,000, which is paltry. We're not interested so much in the fine.
All right.
The most important aspect of what ought to be done and what is being pursued in this particular case is to have him suffer a penal consequence of the nature of a jail term and a declaration that is contravened the Constitution. Thereafter, we will be able to initiate the necessary processes to remove him from office and declare him unsuitable. And speaking of which, there is a gentleman by the name Joseph Boynet, who Justice Odunga found to have contravened the Constitution and ordered him to pay a fine of 2,000. Up to today, the fine has never been paid. The guy lingers in the lawns of State House, and I saw him yesterday in the midst of the Prime Cabinet Secretary and Masengeli. That is the anathema where Kenya finds itself. People who are unsuitable to hold public office are still holding offices.
The information you have given us right here on live television that this particular gentleman you refer to has not paid the fine to date.
No, he hasn't paid the fine.
What happens? He's allowed to walk.
Well, it's an impunity. Right. It's an impunity. The process of holding these individuals to account is often costly and perilous. Some of us have taken it, and not once, not twice. We've taken it time without number. But there must be a concerted effort by the people of Kenya, by the judiciary, to ensure that there is fruition to these efforts we've put in place. Tell me, what is Joseph Boynet doing with the Cabinet Secretary? What is Joseph Boynet doing advising on matters to do with national security? We must point a finger to whoever has appointed Joseph Boynet to whichever office he's holding. Therein lies the responsibility.
All right, I know we're going to go deeper into some particular cases, but I'm also curious about when you say that we must point a finger, Kenyans are tasking me to find out, where does the role of the judiciary end? All right, where does it end? Because you have seen him walking, he hasn't paid his fine. Who then are we supposed to be pointing fingers at to follow up? Because the question here is, we make headlines, we present certain cases in court, sometimes they are thrown out due to lack of sufficient evidence, but this particular one that was executed and followed to the latter, and you're speaking of a fine that is still pending, who should be, responsible for making sure that these fines, which are sometimes supposed to be taking care of some resources that Kenyans need and taxpayers, who should be taking care of him, because seemingly everyone else is just seeing him as you're seeing him, walking around and advising on national issues.
The judiciary has performed its role. Now, the role of oversighting the executive is given to Parliament.
Okay.
These officers who are unsuitable to hold public office will not be in public office if Parliament was performing its function. But let's not stop at Parliament. There has also to be vigilance by the people of Kenya. I'm sure where he comes from, they celebrate to see him hold that office. What do they feel if he's the one advising Gilbert Masengeli to kidnap, abduct, and disappear innocent Kenyans? Kenyans themselves must also act. And how do they act? They must petition the relevant state agencies. For instance, National Police Service, They must be petitioned to remove Joseph Boynet from whatever office he's holding. We don't know what office he's holding, but we've seen him in national security meetings. Joseph Boynet presented his name to be nominated to run as a governor. Where were we? Nobody raised a finger. He ought not have been accepted for nomination.
Mm-hmm.
So, to put a closure to that issue, people and parliament have failed us. Some of us have been on the front line of doing this thing, but we can't do it alone. We can't do it alone. Often we are vindicated, we are profiled.
All right.
But who suffers? It's the people.
When you say the people, of course, we've heard about the 12th Parliament, 13th Parliament, yes, because that's where we are at, failing the people. We saw Kenyans on the streets, you and I saw Kenyans on the streets, and particularly the demography of Gen Zs shocked the whole world. They, occupied Parliament, and they were agitating for, I believe, I said Article 6 of the Constitution, if not, on accountability, which still would lean on the side of impunity. They are demanding for answers and corruption, etc. So is it really the people failing at this point in time? I just want to bring you back on your statement of saying the people of Kenya have failed us. How have they failed us? They have tried, according to the information we have and what we have seen. Some have disappeared, reappeared, died. We're talking about some bodies that have not yet really been clear on who killed them. So people watching today are asking, Wakili, which Kenyans have failed us to this point that you're referring to?
Let me just paint an illustration, a picture of where we are right now.
Okay.
After the people occupied Parliament, what happened? The president rejected the finance bill.
Yes, 2024.
The president dismissed the entire cabinet. Then the president reappointed part of the cabinet that he had dismissed. The president picked certain characters from the opposition and brought them to cabinet. You saw homecomings.
Of course.
Were they attended by hyenas, dogs, or by human beings? By the people. The very same people who claim to have risen in protest to what is happening. Do I seem like I'm giving a credible answer? So fundamentally, what we are seeing will not change. It must be replaced. And there must be a deliberate, concerted effort. And in this particular case, I don't want us to deviate from the point in issue. It is the police.
Okay.
Police are, to a large extent, the majority of them are criminals in uniform. And all of them are potential criminals. So we must deal with this culture of criminals in uniform. Why is it so? And you see, many days have gone since these three gentlemen disappeared. The police cannot come and tell us we are not holding them, we do not know where they are. No. The state has an obligation under the Constitution to guarantee the safety and life of all Kenyans. The state has the monopoly of violence. If a Kenyan disappears, the first person to be held accountable for the disappearance is the state. So the state must say, this is where the person has gone. Or, this is the steps we've taken to identify where the person has gone. The state can never be handicapped. So insofar as these three gentlemen are concerned, they're either being held by the state or they're being killed by the state. It's as simple as that. So they must be produced.
They must be produced.
And if there is no compliance, then responsibility must be pursued from Masengeli to the PS Interior to the CS Interior, henceforth, until where the buck stops.
Now, I'm still curious because all these things, and I know the court works around the law. If the contempt of court, Act 2016 was declared unconstitutional, I'm still going back to legislation because we cannot just speak. We have to be able to define contempt of court. There has to be a paper that does that for all Kenyans to read and understand that this particular leader is truly out of order. The judicature I do not know if it's still functional or if, of course, Act of 2013. Some would argue it went a little, mild to try and create some sense around contempt of court. Maybe you could clarify if I'm wrong, correct me, in as far as the Judicature 2013, Act of 2013 is concerned. Is it at any point helpful in these particular cases today?
Now, for clarity, before the Contempt of Court Act,
yes,
the High Court and the Court of Appeal had power to punish for contempt,
all right,
as the courts in England. And they were given that power through the Judicature, the Judicature Act.
Okay.
So that if you remove the Contempt of Court Act, it does not mean that the court are handicapped. And these are powers that are given to the court by virtue of being a court. When we appeared before Justice Odunga, I said, I cannot babysit my orders. The orders must leave my pronouncements and be effectuated. They must have an impact. So let's not procrastinate over the availability or the insufficiency of the law. There is no insufficiency of law.
All right.
People have been punished for contempt in Kenya for as long as courts have been here. So there is no handicap.
So there is no handicap.
There's no handicap.
Now, looking at what the LSK spoke about, and you've already told us there is an entire process, really. But allow me to now speak for the layperson who's watching. Contempt of court. What do we mean by that? There was a time President William Ruto as well, during the CAS's conversation, among other things, if we'll of course be particular later on, was also noted or marked for ignoring court orders. So we're looking at mostly men and women in higher positions, because Wakili, you and I know, if I steal a chicken here, and the court orders me or summons me to appear, or even the parliament or EACC, if I am a small woman or small man walking around here, you will come for me. The court will come for me. I don't have the laxity of walking around the State House. Why is it always the men above?
In my arguments before Justice Lawrence Mugambe today, I referred him to a case where Bill Clinton had disobeyed a court order, and the judge of the United States enforced that order against Bill Clinton. When we argued the Miguna case before the Court of Appeal, we referred to the famous case of the Rugby Union of South Africa, where Nelson Mandela appeared before a court of law and answered to a charge of contempt. But here in Kenya, the law is there for the observance of the meek and for the disobedience of the mighty. Why is it so? It's because we have failed to push this thing to the very end. And insofar as Masengeli is concerned, I had retired from active combat insofar as these matters are concerned. But I'm back.
Welcome back.
We'll push this thing to the very limit. We'll ensure that Gilbert Masengeli walks in the dusty parts of his home barefoot, a disgraced individual. We must remove him from office as the acting Inspector General of Police. We must remove him from the office of a policeman so that he serves as an example. This is the sacrifice I'm prepared to ensure that people who come after us are not treated like this.
Now, quickly, before we close this conversation, here is the big question. And I have heard from, respectable lawyers and advocates as yourself saying, well, this is the law, this is the Constitution, but how do you send, as someone subordinate, especially in the security force, to arrest the boss? How do you do that? Because is that where they are merely comfortable on saying, you are not going to actually send anyone whatsoever to arrest their seniors, and as far as what you're saying, holding them to account, is concerned? Shed light on how what you are saying you will achieve will actually happen.
You remember, if you listen carefully to my arguments before Justice Lawrence Mugambe,
yes,
I told him order Gilbert Masengeli to present himself to committee maximum prison. That's what happens in developed democracies. If you're convicted and you're jailed, you're asked, when do you want to start your sentence? You will report to the relevant jailhouse on a date given by the court. And that is how it should be.
But how many times, not just Masengeli, for example, we've seen members summoned to the EACC or the DCI officers, they almost don't present themselves. We've had an argument in the past over a particular person, and they had to be probably arrested on their way. That's what the DCI would say. We summoned you, you did not come, so we come after you. So do you really think that these particular people, including Masengeli, if it reaches to that, will surely present himself to the committee?
It doesn't matter. You see, the moment you've convicted Masengeli, you've sentenced him, you've declared him as having violated the Constitution, the logical consequence will be his removal from office. He will not have the protection of office. That's why, as day succeeds night, the fool will rush to the Court of Appeal tomorrow seeking stay, because he knows the moment we remove that uniform, those medals and the badge, is as useless as any vagabond in some Shingiri or somewhere where he comes from. And we must do that. We must remove this protection from these individuals so that they are bare, they're dealt with ordinarily. Not telling us that they're busy attending to matters of national security. What can be more national security than their whereabouts, the safety of 3 innocent Kenyans? You understand? Yeah. This must sadden everybody. Masengeli's mother must feel sad and ashamed of him. Masengeli's father must feel sad and ashamed of him. His wife, his children, his relatives, his friends. He must be shamed by the society. He must be found to be an outcast. Not just him. Everybody who violates the Constitution. Everybody who disobeys a court order. Because if the state wants this to happen to you, it will verily do it. True or not true? True. So why not do it to these people?
Now, you've spoken about 3 men. We do not know if they're dead or alive at this point in time. We continue to await for that particular report. But your perspective on the extrajudicial killings in the country since we as Kenyans gained independence, you walk in the corridors of justice. Kenyans are tasking me today to speak of the inconclusive cases that are probably having files lying in front of clerks, if they still exist, of the courts. What would you speak on at this point in time? Because this particular issue we are speaking about is equally as sensitive. If your kin whereabouts is not known, dead or alive, in police custody or out in the streets, what would you speak on the state of this nation as far as the extrajudicial killings are concerned?
You know, we have the most transformative constitution. We are model democracy in this region, and to a large extent in Africa. Yet we want to conduct our affairs as if we live in the medieval times. No, it cannot be. It cannot be. We cannot aspire to provide a Bill of Rights for the people of Kenya, much better than given by the Constitution of the United States of America, than the Constitution of South Africa. Yet we want to kidnap people. By the way, are you able to tell of your own memory the names of these 3? You can't. How can they be a threat to national security? We are turning logic over its head. We can't just be killing, kidnapping, abducting innocent Kenyans. No. And if they have committed an offense, arrest them, take them to a court of law. That is how it should be. This medieval manner in which those in power want to conduct the affairs of government must be deprecated, and people must refuse. They have to say no. And if the people say no, the leaders will bulge. It must be done.
All right. Yeah. So you're very firm on what we have to do with Masengeli, with all from where I sit, with all due respect for the position he holds. But the question in our big queue today was how to commend him. I need to wrap up, but the other way to commend him. You said, convict him, ask him to march to the prisons himself. Is that in your closing remarks? Is that what you think would be the answer to an alternative way to commend him? Compel him, rather.
Masengeli should be declared to have violated the Constitution. Let him be given a penal sentence.
So no more chances? No more chances declared, oh, come again on Tuesday. This is over and done for him today. This was the last chance.
No, I cannot predict what the court will do.
Okay.
I can only give the procedure that's supposed to happen.
Okay.
For us to have Masengeli as an outcast in his village.
Okay.
We have him convicted, as he has been convicted today. We have him sentenced and declared to have violated the Constitution. Then we remove the uniform from him. After we've removed the uniform from him, he will go to committee maximum prison. And nobody will even be afraid of taking him there. You understand?
All right.
And he will serve as an example to everybody. And it must concern Kenyans, because I keep on saying, what did these three? Nobody knows them. But we have come to know them because they have been disappeared. What did they do that was so egregious that they had to be kidnapped and disappeared? It must concern you. It must concern me. Because they will come for you. They'll come for me. And I must fight. Because I don't want them to come for you. I don't want them to come for me, for him, or anybody else.
All right.
We must leave Kenya a better place than we found it.
Wakili Nelson Havi, thank you very much for creating your time and time to be here to speak to Kenyans, to shed light on things I personally wouldn't really know and wouldn't explain it in the way that you have. Once again, thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
Now, we take a very short breather. We'll bring the BQ once again and sample your feedback on the same. Remember, the law is the law. The Constitution should be upheld by all Kenyans, regardless of your position. Don't go too far away. You're watching KTN Prime. We'll be back after this break. Government issues warnings over